Welcome back, college baseball fans. We have another interview, and it's an assistant coach here. It's Eric Tyler. He's the hitting coach and the recruiting coordinator for the Duke Blue Devils, one of the recruiting coordinators.
Yeah.
Eric, thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
No, I'm doing well, and I appreciate you having me, Monty, and really looking forward to this, and really appreciate all you do for the conference.
Thanks. Yeah, and you're entering your third season at Duke.
Yep.
Uh, and you've had a pretty good first 2 years as as a guy helping with the hitting.
Yeah, I always tell people it's unfortunate we've had such good years, and they still won't give me an at bat. I hadn't hit a home run or hadn't scored a run or nothing. So I think the numbers are a byproduct of having really, really good hitters in here. And I always go back to kind of the first piece of advice I got as a hitting coach, and it was I got here, and Ty Blankmeyer was in his first year here as well, and I reached out to Ed Blankmeyer, his dad, longtime coach at St. John's, and I just asked, Coach, you've done this for a long time. You're really good at it. What's it take to be a good hitting coach? And he said, you want to be a good hitting coach, get good hitters. And so I think we've had the fortune of having good hitters for the past 2 years. And so I had a good little run here. And hopefully with this 2025 squad, we'll continue that and elevate that as well. We've got some good hitters in the program once again.
Yeah, and you come from East Carolina, where you had your playing career, and were you there 1 year or 2 years as a coach afterwards before you went to do the hitting instruction in between ECU and Duke? Was it 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, it was 1 year. It was 1 year right after I finished playing, and in complete honesty, wasn't ready for it, and from a mental standpoint and a maturity standpoint, and always will be extremely grateful for my time in Greenville. And looking back on that time, I probably needed that time to be where I'm at today. I love my time there. I love playing for Coach Godwin. Got to play for both Coach Godwins, actually. Billy Godwin recruited me, and he was there my freshman year. And then I was there the first 3 years of the Cliff Godwin era. Got to play for Jeff Palumbo as well. Dan Roselle, who's now at Kentucky.
That's pretty special. You've gotten to work with a lot of really great coaches, and you're pretty close to home. Being in Durham, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is I talked to you before the show that I also want to get your pitching coach counterpart onto the show, BK, because the job that you two have done in the last 2 years, him particularly in 2023 and you last year, I thought were understated. I think both you guys did incredible jobs with what he did with those injuries, and then what you did to elevate some of the guys from last year. Because I think going into the season last year, a lot of people had questions about the offense, and we saw career years. Zach Morris comes to mind. He's a guy who did really well at VMI, but something clicked in Durham for him that, he was a second team All-American. What kind of adjustments were you making for guys like him, Ben Miller, Logan Bravo? Even Devin Obie, who was a returner. There had to be some adjustments that you had some impact on that helped them boost, even though the level of competition was higher.
Yeah, it's really cool you brought up Zemo or Zach Morris. So I was actually texting him last week. He's working in kind of the Raleigh area now, and he just sent me a text. It's like, it was criminal. We only got 1 year together. And it was like, it was such a cool experience. And with all of those grad guys and with Devin Obie and some of the younger guys that really developed, for me, it comes down to relationships, right? And Zach Morris was extremely successful at VMI. And one of the things I'm passionate about, whether it's one of our incoming high school kids or whether it's a transfer, is like, you're here for a reason. Like, we don't recruit bad hitters. If you're recruited to Duke, you can hit a little bit, right? That's been established. And so what have you done in the past that you really like, that works for you? What have you done in the past that doesn't work for you and you hate doing and you don't understand doing? And let's try to find some middle ground here. Here's what I see. Here's what the numbers are telling us. And you brought up Brady. One of the really cool things is Brady helps me almost daily, right? Brady is as tech savvy and as data driven of a coach as I've been around. And so he can help me on the offensive side where, we're battling in the fall, and I can say, hey, what do you see here with this guy? What do the numbers show you with Zach Morris? How would you attack him? And one of the things we do as a program is all of our hitters will sit down with Brady at the end of the fall and say, all right, how would you get me out? Right. And so now we're starting into the game planning side of it and creating clarity. And that's a word I use a lot in our program is we want to create clarity in whatever we're doing, right? If we're doing a drill before practice in the cage, why are you doing it? And how is that going to make you a better hitter? And so tying in the relationship side of things and understanding, what a guy's thinking, what a guy's feeling, what a guy needs to hear, and then tying in, okay, well, here's what the numbers are telling us, and here's how we can attack that, just to have clarity in their plan of like, hey, man, as simple as what are you really good at? What do you want to get better at? And how do we do that?
Yeah, and that brings me perfectly to my next question. Do you have a specific philosophy that you're kind of using or looking for guys that you recruit, or are you kind of just trying to gear towards their strengths as they come in and you keep it on an individual level?
Yeah, Monty, to tell you the truth, that's like the most popular question I get asked as a hitting coach is like, what's your philosophy? What's your style? And I've always answered it the same way. And this comes a little bit from the background of being in the facility, right? So I spent 4 years in a facility at Baseball Rebellion, where I worked with all types of different ages and talent and ability level. And from, the 10-year-old little Johnny that came in to we had professional athletes walking in the door. So I was able to have to kind of flip the switch and understand how to communicate the same things differently. Right. And so, a lot of what we talk about is individualized to that player because that's my background. And the way I've always answered this question is, if we have 20 different hitters on our roster, then I have 20 different styles and I'm considered 20 different hitting coaches. Right. And I think a lot of times with styles or teachings, when it comes to hitting, they create limits and boundaries. And that's not something we want. Right. It's kind of an open canvas, a blank canvas. And we're working one-on-one to make that individual player better. Because if we have 20 individuals who are getting better, then as a group offensively, we're going to get better, right? And obviously there's some things in team offense that we have to work on as a group. When it comes to development of a player, we look at it at Duke super individualized.
I love that. And I wanted to – the lineup you guys had last year was a lot of fun because you had a very veteran half, and then there were times where you had a very young half because you have AJ, who is I mean he's got an incredible knowledge of the strike zone and knows when not to chase, when to let the game come to him. You've got KJ, who apparently originally I guess wasn't necessarily thought he was going to be a hitter, but he forced you guys to take notice. You got Maka Winslow, who was one of the top catching recruits, Chase Cruson last year, and then Sam Harris. I want to talk about Sam a little bit because I've been hearing forever how good he is and what your take on him is and what he could potentially be.
Yeah, no, Sam is one of my favorite hitters in our program. And one thing we talk about a lot inside the program is not being scared of hard, not being scared of difficult. And Sam took it on the chin a couple times last year, like for a lot of his freshman year, like a lot of freshmen in the country do. And one thing I can say about him is he's never wavered, right? He's not a roller coaster of emotion. Like he's as steady as they come, and we'll mess with him about it a little bit. But when Sam walks out of the cage, you don't know if he just went 5 for 5 with 5 home runs or if he just fouled 5 balls off into the turtle. Like you don't know. And that's one of the really, really good things about him. And one of the reasons he was able to, be behind a Logan Bravo at first base last year. He only got 4 at bats last year, right? But he continued to work and continued to challenge himself and never backed away from that to where he can go to the Northwoods and have 100+ at bats and really put himself on the map. And all he's done this fall is come back and continue that, right? And the cool thing to see is it's the same kid that was here last fall, personality-wise, emotion-wise. Like it's as steady as they come. He doesn't back away from failure. And that's one of the things with our hitters that, like, if you just keep showing up and keep doing what you're supposed to do and keep attacking what is hard, what is difficult, then at some point you're going to come out on the other side of that. And that's kind of where Sam's at right now.
That's part of the beauty of baseball. It's hard. It's a game of failure. I mean, you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times and still have a 300 average, which is decent, But Sam was the one player I was most excited about for the scrimmage against NC State, and I was not disappointed by his home run there. He he looked like he barely swung. Did he? I mean, on that home run, I was sitting up there. I think Marcello Mastriani was up there with us, and he was like, he can hit. I was like, I know. I've been hearing about him for months. Haven't gotten to see him. I think right before he hit the home run, I was like, I would pay to see him take BP. And luckily, he hit the home run. It was unbelievable. You've got Noah Murray, who had a breakout summer, and then you have 3 of those freshmen from last year who got a lot of playing time back. I mean, you've got a lot of fun pieces heading into this year, plus another group of, transfers. Is anyone standing out in particular this fall? I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are, but is anybody more so than even you thought?
Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot of returners. This is by far the most returners we've had offensively since I've been here. And we've had some success this fall, and that's been a little bit different. I always tell the story of the last year's team in the fall. They hit about 230 and like maybe 6 home runs, and I'm like, I don't know if we're ever going to score a run next year. Like this is not good. And it's just you're going against Jonathan Santucci and Fran O'Shell and Charlie Bielenson and Jimmy Romano, and like you got 5 guys on that staff drafted that all threw last fall. And we got a lot of new bats, and we're struggling, but they needed that to be what they were in the spring. And so this fall, it's been a good test of like, hey, you guys are returners. You guys have had some success. Now we've got to go through the same thing, and our pitchers have done a great job with that. Our pitchers are throwing a ton of strikes this fall, and that does nothing but help your swing decisions, right? You talked about AJ's control the strike zone. Like that's where it starts for us offensively, and our pitchers are allowing us to do that this fall, which has been awesome. But the returners have been great. Another one to add to that returner list, Tyler Albright, another guy who started every day as a freshman, kind of faced some adversity last year, went to Burlington, had a great summer, and now he's had his best fall that he's had in Durham, and really excited about him. Excited about the incoming guys, the Jake Hyde, the Ben Rounds, the Jake Berger, the Nick DiPietrantonio's of the world. I'm excited to see kind of how this group blends together and what it looks like in the spring, because there's a lot of talent on the field. But again, it's got to merge, it's got to glue together, and it's got to become a one unit when February comes around.
Yeah, I think I asked Coach Pollard about it after y'all scrimmage against Charlotte. The depth is unbelievable this year, because it looks like it's that's where it gets really fun. It's like, all right, I get to do the deep dive on Duke in January or February, and I'm like, all right, how am I going to think that it's going? And it's going to be completely wrong, but it's fun to have those conversations from a fan point of view. I do want to ask you about a really cool moment last year. Jimmy Evans down the stretch in the ACC tournament and then in the NCAA tournament. It sounds like y'all's game plan was to go to Jimmy Evans if you needed a ball put in play. And what kind of gave you that confidence when I think he had like something like 11 at bats before the ACC tournament? And then in a critical game, I think you were still losing at the time to Miami. He comes in and he goes down 0-2, I believe, and comes up with a huge sac fly to tie the game or put him on the board.
Yeah, one of the coolest stories, and that's like why you coach right there in a nutshell, is what happened right there. Jimmy Evans is back again this year. He's dealt with some injuries this fall, but he's also back. Jimmy was a guy, again, faced some adversity, faced some struggle, but like never changed, right? And he's the guy that's always in the cage and always grinding, always asking me about his swing. And then, doesn't get a ton of at-bats throughout the year, would get some pinch hits along the way. And then against Miami in the semifinals, we're down 1. I think it's the 7th or 8th inning. We've got a runner at third and 1 out. And the guy on the mound for them was a right-hander with a good slider. And so we had a right-on-right matchup. His best strikeout pitch was the slider. All we needed to do was move it. So we wanted to take away the slider by going left-handed, but then also Jimmy Evans was always great at putting the ball in play. So we went after that. I always give Jimmy a hard time. Jimmy got an 0-1 fastball in that count, and he fouled it off. And I was like,
that was it.
That was your job. That was your job, is to put that in play. And then, of course, in perfect Jimmy Evans fashion, moves the ball with 2 strikes, great situational hitting, he ties the game. Then comes back in the regional against Oral Roberts and hits his first career jack for us in a game we won in a regional. So had some big clutch hits down the way.
Yeah, I think I was listening to that on the radio on my way to UVA, and I was yelling in my car because I was like, all right, Jimmy Evans, I could use a I used the picture of him that I used as like a meme or something. So it was really a lot of fun. But was that a conversation that you and Pollard had before the game, or was that an in-game conversation to go to Jimmy?
Yeah, that was in game, and that's one of the reasons I love working for Coach Pollard is he's got a lot of faith in his assistants, and so I said, hey, let's go to Jimmy here, and there was no conversation about it. He has 100% faith, and just like if we make a pitching change, and again, it's one of the greatest reasons to work with Coach Pollard. It's just a ton of faith in us and a ton of faith in our players for Jimmy not to have a ton of at bats and then go get the job done there.
Yeah, one of the things I loved about that, as well as a couple of the hitters, I think, said when Chuck came onto the mound, they knew they were going to win, and he came in when you guys were losing, and that just shows how like good a pitcher he is. That you got all of a sudden, we're going to hit because Charlie's not going to give up anything, so we got to hit. So just a special team. That ACC tournament run had to feel really great for you guys. I mean, hell of an experience.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was a special team, and I'm glad they got to experience that. Chuck Bielenson, he got a lot of hype around the ACC. I don't know if he got the justice that he deserved nationally. It's one of the best college pitchers I've ever seen, right? Just the ability to take the ball twice a weekend through multiple innings. He wanted the ball every day, and just how productive he was. I think like probably 2 bad pitches all season, and it cost him a couple bad innings, but that guy wanted the ball every day, throwing multiple innings, and would shut games down from the 6th inning.
Watching him in the dugout, it almost seemed like you guys just wanted to throw him out there to get him away from you, because he would just stalk the dugout. He would hang out behind Pollard. I watched him so much, it was cracking me up because I could just see him being like, hey, can I get in now? It's like, no. But
100%. I think it was either you or somebody else made that meme of you got more innings. And I was that's like the perfect depiction of Charlie Bielenson. Y'all got any more than innings?
Yeah, exactly. That was the perfect one. And Chad Knight had a big hit, or had a hit at the end of the ACC championship game. That was a really cool moment because he was a co-host on for me for the last 6 weeks of the season. So a really special moment for him, and just an incredible experience to watch you guys win that. Did you get to be a part of that dog pile?
We missed out on that dog pile. We'll save that dog pile for a different round. But Chad Knight, it's going to be tough to talk about the 2024 ACC championship team without talking about Chad Knight, right? And that's from his moments of had a walk-off hit in a conference game. I believe it was against Miami. Just an unbelievable teammate and a guy who kind of knew what buttons to press with what guys and came up with kind of the team mantra. Like for the past 2 years I've been here, we've had a team mantra, and we'll get some T-shirts printed out and made up, and last year's was Stay on Black, and that came from him. And we were at NC State on Sunday morning, and we had lost on Friday in a tough one where we were winning for most of the game, and then Saturday we gave up 6 runs in the 9th and got walked off. Eli Serrano hit a 3-run home run to walk us off, and it was just like we were a game or two below 500 in the ACC, and we're really scuffling, and we're in the cages, and I'm down there with them in pregame, and Wallace Clark just can't seem to find it, and he's struggling and struggling and struggling. And his first at bat, kind of more of the same. And Chad Knight looks at him and says, hey, man, you just got to stay on black. And the whole mantra is like stay on black. Like if you're playing roulette, you want to switch from red to black and different colors. And, hey, man, stick with what we do. Stick with your process, and it'll pay off. And the next at bat, Wallace Clark, of course, perfect fitting, hits a home run, and all of a sudden we get Stay on Black T-shirts printed out, and that's the slogan for the rest of the year. But I think that's just one of many moments of Chad Knight of just knowing what buttons to push and being one of the best teammates I've been around.
Yeah, it's impressive to see what really makes a successful baseball team, because there's so many guys behind the scenes. You may not have think that somebody like Chad Knight or Jimmy Evans is doing too much, but yet they're a critical part of the team and the chemistry and everything. So it's just interesting to hear how because you guys were a championship team, the ACC champions. So it's just interesting to hear those kind of different things. But I want to shift back a little bit to your career. How did you end up at Duke after 4 years at Baseball Rebellion?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story. So I'm at Baseball Rebellion, which is a facility now in Raleigh. At the time, it was located in Durham, and just had some relationships with one of my best friends that worked there, played for Coach Pollard at App State, and so he had some trust to send a couple guys to us one summer, and that kind of blossomed into 3 or 4 more guys the next year, and really started to work with Joey Loperfido, Will Hoyle, Mike Rothenberg, and kind of that crew, RJ Schreck. A lot of those guys started to come over to where I had a pretty good relationship with Coach Pollard at that point. And then the job came open, and I just shot him a text. Hey, Coach, I'd be interested in getting back into college baseball and getting back into kind of the competitive side of things. And it worked out. And I'm very, very right place, right time. I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, didn't have to move or anything. You were already there. It's the two coaches you've mentioned that you've basically worked under as a player and a coach now, Cliff Godwin and Chris Pollard, two really good coaches. What's it been like? What's the differences in working with them, and how excited were you last year when you got to go back as a coach when you guys faced East Carolina at the Jungle?
Yeah, that was one of the weirdest moments of my life. And then, and just to walk back into that place and be on the other side of things. And just, like I said, super grateful for my time in Greenville. Loved every second of it. Really appreciative of some of the fans that stopped by during that game and said hello. But that definitely an experience that a little uneasy, right? Going back into that place. But super grateful to have worked for Coach Pollard and Coach Godwin, and played for Coach Godwin. And Coach Palumbo there as well. Just those guys have shaped me, and anything I've learned in baseball came from my coaches, and including those two guys. And really, it's a similar message in different deliveries, right? Coach Godwin is very demanding and has his way, and has had a ton of success about that. And Coach Pollard's message is very similar, and it's just in a different delivery. And I think that's what I've learned most from those guys, is just the consistency of your message, but also both of those coaches want their players to be great men and great people for the future. And that's what they care about. Like, both those guys are going to their players' weddings afterwards and keeping in touch with those guys 10, 15 years later. And that's what I admire the most. And that's what I try to emulate the most is, look, anybody can talk X's and O's, but those two guys, they change people's lives. Right. And for the better. And they take 18-year-old boys that come into their program and they leave as men, and they leave as men because of those guys. And it's the classic, like, you don't realize what they're teaching you until you're 5-10 years out of there. And it's like, oh man, that was super valuable.
Yeah, that tends to be the common theme for what separates like good coaches from the great ones. The great ones in college baseball seem to really care about developing the people first rather than the baseball player. That kind of comes secondary, and that's, I think, a big difference between some of the great coaches and the just good coaches. It's always felt like that from in my interactions with Coach Pollard. Really, I mean, I think I met you at the ACC tournament. I was talking to Chuck, and Pollard was like, "Hey, have you met ET?" And I was like, "Oh, first of all, Pollard knows my name, and then second of all, he's making sure I meet one of his assistant coaches. So it just kind of shows the kind of person he is, because not all coaches do that. So I thought that was a really cool moment, and kind of shows what kind of a person he is and the character he has.
Absolutely.
So what series, you guys haven't dropped your schedule publicly yet, but it's out there, but is there a series that you're looking for, a series or a game or a matchup that you're looking forward to the most?
Oh, you're trying to get me put up some bulletin board material here.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. I got to word it differently. It's funny because when I ask some of the players, I try to go, what pitcher are you most looking forward to face? I asked the Cal and Stanford guys that, and I'm like, let me rephrase that so it doesn't sound like you're looking forward to facing Jamie Arnold.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, I tell you, like, ACC weekends are a grind, and it's all about when you play teams. And somebody told me that when I first got in the league. It's like, hey man, you don't know until you get there, right? They might be red hot when you see them, or they might be beat up and hurt, and you don't know. And it's about when you play teams. And I think one of the consistent messages from Coach Pollard is always, hey, like, he quotes Mike Tomlin on it often, like, we're not playing the other team. We're playing nameless gray faces, right? And we have to play our game, and we have to play the game better than whoever we're playing against. And baseball, it's it's the hardest. You play 56 games, right? You can't get all hyped up and amped up for this game on Saturday, right? And then you come back on Tuesday and you're playing a midweek game and you're just not quite as excited about it, right? So you've got to find a way. I think that's why you see stupid antics in the dugout from college teams, is like you got to find a way to be the same team 56 plus times in a season. So you try to push off the, hey, this is a big weekend, or hey, this is a small weekend, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I remember actually, I don't know if it was Chuck or AJ that we interviewed post-game after the first Wake Forest game that you guys played, which would have been the opening ACC game last year. And somebody mentioned the gray faceless thing. I think it had to have been Chuck, because he was like, yeah, it's hard to – you tried to, like – they make them gray faceless, but it's hard to forget that it's Nick Kurtz and Seaver King and Josh Hartle out there. So, you know, when they're that good, it sometimes can be really hard to forget that. But so you didn't answer. So we've got a non-answer. Any ACC series is what you're going with.
I'll give you an answer. We're going to play Northwestern early in the season, second or third week. I'm excited for that because I get to see Tyler Ross, who's their recruiting coordinator and used to coach here my first year. He was on staff here. So I'm excited for Northwestern.
There we go. All right. That's good. All right. Northwestern, that'll be fun. How do you feel about the new roster restrictions that are coming and the scholarships being added up to 34? Because that's going to change the way you do things, especially as the recruiting coordinator. I imagine it's going to be really tough on the pitching side, because, you know, it's nice to have plenty of pitchers, but have you guys talked about that? Because I know there's still a lot of questions regarding that change as well.
Yeah, there's a ton. And there's a ton of questions. There's a ton of misinformation going around. There's a ton of guessing. Like, we don't really know what college baseball is going to look like. What we do know is more scholarships in college baseball is a good thing. Point blank. The days of 11.7 going away is a good thing. Right now, what the roster limits look like, is it 34 right away? Is it 38, 36, 34? Who knows? One thing I hope is that if we get to 34, that will raise the number of fall games that we can play against other teams, right? Because 34 is going to be pretty tough to scrimmage with a ton in the fall. So we need to be able to play other teams. That's my hope. I don't know what roster limits will look like, but again, hopefully, if we go to 34, they'll let us play more outside competition in the fall. More money in college baseball is a good thing. Being able to have your athletes walk out of Duke without as much debt is a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, it's just really interesting that they've kind of pushed this out there, but without answering all the questions. It's, you know, red shirts, stuff like that, all this extra stuff, and it's just interesting they're pushing it, but we don't have the answers to everything that we need to have answered for. So it's a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun to talk about and to talk with recruits about who are trying to figure it out themselves. Yeah. And so we hopefully we'll hear something soon. But the good news is that the players we have will get more scholarship money.
Absolutely. As we're finishing up, I wanted to talk about some of the individual players. You get Ben Miller and Wallace Clark back. I asked Pollard about this. How great is that to have those two guys? It looks like, I know you guys aren't set in stone with the lineup, but in the two scrimmages you guys had, those guys were your top two hitters. I mean, Ben hit 2 in the 2-hole last year, and Wallace Clark was basically your second leadoff man in the 9 spot. I mean, how great is that to have those two guys back and on the left side of that infield?
Yeah, those two being back in our program give us all probably an extra hour of sleep a night, right? Like not having to worry about that over there. And those guys have been phenomenal with the younger guys that we brought in under them. And a guy like Andrew Bell and Jeff Luigi, who have came in as freshman infielders and get to take ground balls with Wallace Clark every day, like that's a crash course on how to play shortstop in the ACC. It's just take ground balls next to Wallace Clark every day and watch what he does, right? If you're a freshman hitter in our program and you're struggling to kind of find your footing, go hit with Ben Miller today and watch what he does, right? Like those two are the best of what they do respectively. And it's just been a blessing to have those guys back and be able to pencil Wallace at shortstop and Ben at third or wherever those guys are going to play. But it's just been nice to have those guys back in for their ability, but also like that's what's going to make your program better. Like if you have guys who are seniors in your program that are willing to take young guys under their wings and say, hey man, this is, this is my fourth go around, or for Ben, this is my sixth go around at this. Like, this is how it's done, right? This is how you handle yourself in your drill work. This is how you handle yourself during practice. This is how you handle yourself off the field. And that's what those guys have done a really good job of. And again, just really, really thankful that those guys are back. We could have easily lost both those guys to professional baseball, but they both want something that is bigger than that, and bigger than the ACC championship. Those guys are hungry.
Yeah, I also would argue that there's a number of Duke guys that should have gotten opportunities at the pro level, but that's just me. I think age is being overvalued a little bit at the MLB level, so that was a little bit eye-opening for me for a number of guys in the ACC in particular, and Zemo and Logan Bravo and guys like that. But that's pretty much going to wrap it up for us, Eric. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to watching Duke and seeing you guys. I love coming down there, and I'm hoping to get down there. You guys will be my last fall thing, so I'm hoping to come down there and see the renovations to Coombs and see a little bit the Fall World Series. I'm still recovering from my trip to Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, though, so the idea of driving right now is just not fun.
That was a heck of a run you went on there.
I didn't realize it until I did the numbers, and I was like, oh, that was a choice.
Yeah. I think everybody's going to be excited to come to Durham in the spring and see the new Jack Coombs field, and really excited about the renovations and the development that we've got going on at the park. And so look forward to having you down and everybody else down to see the new park. I know our guys are fired up about it.
Yeah, it's one of the more underrated ballparks. I think a lot of people who like to talk down on it haven't ever been there, because it's a lot more fun than maybe people would think, and it's only getting better with these renovations.
No doubt, it's only getting better, and it'll be one of the best parks in the ACC before long.
Absolutely. So, for our listeners and watchers, thanks for tuning in. We're going to have more assistant coach interviews throughout the fall and winter here as we approach the 2025 season. Again, thank you, Eric. We'll be back in a couple of days with another episode. And until then, go Blue Devils.
Awesome. Thank you, Monty.